I get a lot of questions about trusts, and there's no doubt that they are a misunderstood and underused aspect of financial planning, but they can really make a difference. So let's talk about trusts. I remember being introduced to the idea of trusts when I was sitting my basic finance exams 22 years ago. And I remember just thinking they were really esoteric and abstract kind of concept. And they are in a way. But my job now is to make it not like that for you. So let's put 5 minutes on the clock down here and say a quick thank you to my friends at 7 Investment Management for continuing to sponsor the show down here. And let's crack on. So today I want to introduce the idea of a trust, and then next week, and I think probably the week after, just look at the actual applications of how they can be used in financial planning. So the easiest way, I think, to think about a trust is as a box. Now, I was going to have a prop, but you people understand what a box looks like, right? So the idea of a box is that you put stuff in it, and that is now separate from your other stuff. It's in a box and it's kind of self-contained. Essentially what you're doing is you're removing the stuff in that box out of your personal control and into the control of some other people called your trustees. Now this is a good time to mention that there are actually 3 parties to any trust arrangement. The first is the settlor, or just settler, most people call it, and that is the person or people setting up the trust and dictating its terms. They are the people placing assets, whether that's money or whatever, inside the trust. Next you have the trustees, and they are the people tasked with looking after the box and its contents on your behalf. Now, it's very normal for the settlor to be a trustee, so you can wear 2 hats in this whole weird metaphorical game we're playing here. But a trustee's job is to look after what's in the box and to execute the settlor's instructions as per the terms of the trust. And then we have the beneficiaries, and as the name suggests, these are the people who will benefit from the trust. The money or the property, whatever's inside it, as per the trust document. Now let's talk about that document a little bit. A trust can be set up by something called a trust deed, and that is a standalone legal document which sets up the terms of the trust, names the trustees, and just lays out what can and cannot happen to the stuff inside the box. There is also some overarching legislation which goes way back to the early 1900s, but it has been updated more recently. But the trust deed is the most important document. It is that document that lays everything out. Importantly, it can be a standalone document or it can be part of your will. Trusts set up in a will are intelligently called will trusts. Just as a little aside, a trust can also be set up under the law of the land, called a statutory trust. This sometimes happens where a parent dies and leaves a minor child as their beneficiary. Under law, a child cannot inherit because they're not an adult, and so a trust is set up, a statutory trust under the law of the land, to look after whatever it is they've inherited until they reach the age of 18. Really annoying, there's a fly in here. I'm going to have to kill it. Did I say kill it? I meant humanely let it out of the window. Why do we use the word humane to talk about dealing with things other than humans? These are the things that I lie awake thinking about. So what kind of things might you put inside a trust? Well, life insurance policies is the classic thing to put in there so that the proceeds of the life insurance policy pays out to the trust. You can also put money in there, property, gold bars, a car, an expensive antique snuff box collection. Take your pick. You can put it into a trust. Of course, when you're putting a car into a trust, you're not actually putting it into a box. That's just a metaphor, but you got that. What happens is it's the ownership of the asset that gets passed to the trust. Importantly, it now belongs to the trust, whatever it is, and the process of it going from you, the settlor, to the ownership of the trust is a transfer, and that can have tax implications, which we'll deal with in a little bit, probably the week after next. Crucially, a trust is a standalone legal entity. Think of it as a person almost. It has its own tax rules. It pays tax, and so it is a standalone legal and tax entity. Really important concept. Finally, for this week at least, 2 headline types of trust. The first is called a vested interest trust, and this is where one or other of the beneficiaries have an absolute right to whatever is inside the trust. So let's say I write a trust into my will and I leave some money to my 2 daughters. Well, if I named them Ellie and Kate and said in my will that I wanted them to have half each of the money that I have placed into trust for them, that's pretty clear. Now, the alternative is a non-vested interest trust, but most of us call those discretionary trusts. And here, nobody has an absolute right to what's inside the trust. Instead, they have a potential right to it. And whether or not any one person gets anything is down to the discretion of the trustees. So this is a bit tricky to get your head around. So let's say in my will, I set up a trust, a discretionary trust. Instead of naming my specific children, Ellie and Kate, I could say, I want the proceeds of the trust to pay to my children or remoter issue. So that means that if I have more kids in the future, then they could potentially benefit, not just the 2 that I have right now. Pretty unlikely, by the way. Seen a man about that. Too much information? No, we're bonding, we're sharing. It also means that my future grandchildren or great-grandchildren, or even further down the line, could potentially benefit from the vast wealth that I'm going to place in trust when I die, or at least as long as the money lasts. By not naming any specific individuals, I've given my trustees discretion over who might benefit at whatever time. So it provides a lot of flexibility, but also puts a lot of responsibility onto the trustees. You know what? I think that's probably it for this week. Covered a lot of ground already, but there's more to come next week. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you in next week's 5 Minute Friday.